How did his phone password ruin my life? Well, honestly, I'm so embarrassed I'm afraid of writing this, but it seems like the only way I'll be able to fully realize what it has come to. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but it started out as the usual. Girl meets boy in a rocky relationship. He told me all the right things, and my stupid, insecure self thought that he was all that, a manly, unappreciated ex-Marine carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. We had so much in common it was scary. He knew just what to say, and I ate it all up. I don't know if it was love at first sight or if I was just desperate to be loved, but I fell hard and fast. Everything he said made sense. He spoke about loyalty, about respect, about building a future together. He said he'd never met anyone like me before, someone who actually listened, someone who actually cared. And I believed him, every single word. It was messy from the start. He was still with someone when we met, and I hate myself for how I justified that. They're already breaking apart, I told myself. I'm not the reason it's ending. And when he finally left her for me, I felt victorious, like I had won. He treated me like a princess. He moved in with me. I met his parents, they loved me. I met his friends, they adored me. We built routines, shared breakfasts, lazy Sundays. The house felt warm for the first time in years. I thought I had finally created a home, and I clung to that illusion with everything I had. Obviously, it started off in the worst way. I have never cheated before, but I thought it would be different. I gave him everything she didn't, right? I convinced myself that what we had was deeper, stronger, real. And for about a year, it was. Or at least I believed it was. He was attentive, affectionate, supportive, the kind of man who would pick me up from the floor and hold me until the shaking stopped. I trusted him. I needed him. He was there when my mother had a mental breakdown and tried to kill me. He was there when I thought I couldn't breathe. He condemned everyone who had ever treated me poorly and swore he would never be like them. He told me I deserved better, that he was better. And I believed him. Then one ordinary day, a single tiny moment cracked everything. I had never looked through his phone. I respected his privacy. I didn't even have the password. But one night we were playing a mobile game together and he casually handed me his phone to download it. That was it. That was the moment. No suspicion, no paranoia, just a simple, meaningless gesture. He walked out of the room to grab a drink, and I don't even know what compelled me to tap Instagram. Maybe curiosity, maybe instinct. Maybe a part of me already knew something was wrong. And then I saw it. At first, it was small little messages with usernames I didn't recognize. Gun bunnies, of accounts. Random women. He was telling them he was lonely. He was flirting, sending photos. Not nudes, but ones designed to impress, to bait. I felt my chest tighten as I scrolled. And then I found the deleted ones, the ones he hadn't meant for anyone to see. Conversations with his ex. Another girl I knew. Sweet words, familiar phrases, promises, lies. And suddenly, the air in the room felt heavy. I stared at the screen until my hands started shaking. Something inside me broke. It wasn't a loud shatter. It was quiet, like a thread snapping deep in my chest. I put the phone down. I didn't confront him. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just shut down. That night, I smiled like nothing happened. I kissed him goodnight. I laughed at his jokes. But every time I looked at him, it was like I was looking at a stranger wearing the skin of someone I once loved. Since that day, I haven't been the same. I watch him differently now. Every word he says feels rehearsed. Every touch feels foreign. I nod and smile, but inside I'm cold. I know what I'm in for. I know what he is. And I know what I have to do. I can't kick him out yet, not with our financial situation. I need time. I need a plan. And while I wait, I've decided to make his life just a little more miserable. Nothing obvious. Nothing dramatic. Just enough to make him question things. Just enough to plant the seeds of doubt in his own mind. I've never been the type to seek revenge. I don't usually hold grudges. I believe that bitterness eats away at you more than it ever hurts the person who wronged you. But this time is different. This isn't just betrayal, it's humiliation. It's destruction. He built me up just to tear me down in the exact same ways he swore he never would. And now, I will play the long game. I won't lash out. I won't lose control. I will fake everything until the time is right. And when that time comes, I'll make sure he feels every ounce of what he's done to me. For now, this is my secret. I'm too embarrassed to tell my friends, and my family is practically non-existent. So here it is, out in the open, in the only place I can bear to share it. A phone password, one meaningless string of numbers, shattered my life. The strangest thing about betrayal is how ordinary everything looks the next day. The morning after I found those messages, the sun still rose. The coffee still brewed. He still kissed me on the forehead and called me baby like nothing had changed. And maybe for him, nothing had. But for me, everything was different. I didn't recognize the girl staring back at me in the mirror. She looked the same, but she wasn't me. She was quieter, colder, calculating. Something fundamental had shifted. I was done being naive. I was done believing words without proof. I spent that whole day thinking about how easily he had fooled me. How confidently he'd told me that I was the one while messaging other women at the same time. I replayed the conversations I'd read. The little jokes, the I'm lonely lines, the subtle fishing for attention. I thought about the deleted chats, the ones he clearly didn't want me to see. He wasn't just flirting, he was laying foundations, testing doors, seeing which ones might open. And all the while, I was right there, cooking dinner, folding laundry, believing we were happy. It made me sick. But even through the nausea, there was one thing I knew for certain. I wouldn't let him see me break. Not yet. If he was going to tear my life apart behind my back, then I would dismantle his right in front of him, slowly, quietly, piece by piece. So I started playing a part. I smiled more. I kissed him longer. I asked about his day and listened attentively, nodding at his stories as if they mattered to me. At night, I curled up next to him and let him believe everything was fine. And all the while, I was studying him, watching how he moved, what made him nervous, when he reached for his phone, how he reacted to certain names. I noticed that he got twitchy when I picked up my own phone. He'd glance over subtly, checking if I was near his. He never left it unattended anymore, not even when he went to the bathroom. That told me everything I needed to know. He knew what he was doing was wrong. He was afraid of being caught again. And that fear was my first weapon. I began planting little seeds of uncertainty, small, untraceable changes that would gnaw at him. I'd leave my phone face down near his and casually mention how much I missed talking to an old friend from college. I'd smile at my screen and type nonsense messages while sitting next to him. Once, I even laughed quietly and put my phone away when he asked what was so funny. It drove him crazy. "Who's that?" he asked one evening, his tone casual but his eyes sharp. "Just someone I used to know," I said lightly, brushing it off. Nothing important. I could see the thought eating away at him. He tried to play it cool, but jealousy has a way of creeping into everything. His tone, his posture, the way he touched me. And for the first time, I saw a flicker of fear in his eyes. Good. Let him wonder. Let him feel the doubt that had consumed me since that night. But it wasn't just about getting into his head. I also needed to prepare for the future, my future. I started quietly moving money into a separate account. I looked into job opportunities that would allow me to live comfortably without him. I spoke to a friend about potential living arrangements, just in case. Every step was small, deliberate, and hidden. Because the truth is, I couldn't just leave. Not yet. Our finances were too intertwined. The lease was in both our names, and I wasn't about to blow up my life without a safety net. There were moments when the anger would boil over, when I'd catch him scrolling on his phone late at night, and my fingers would itch to grab it and throw it against the wall. But I didn't. I swallowed the rage, smiled sweetly, and asked if he wanted a cup of tea. Because anger was loud, and loud was messy. But revenge, real revenge, was silent. It was patient. It waited in the dark until the perfect moment to strike. I also started writing everything down. Every suspicious action, every inconsistency, every lie. I created a private log, not because I planned to use it legally, though maybe I would, but because I wanted to remember. I wanted a record of exactly how much he had underestimated me. And as the days turned into weeks, something unexpected happened. He started acting different, more attentive, more affectionate, almost nervous. He'd offer to help with chores he used to ignore. He'd ask me if I was happy. He'd hold me tighter at night. It was almost funny. The man who had betrayed me was now terrified of losing me, and he didn't even know I was already gone in every way that mattered. But the part that stuck with me most wasn't the fear. It was the guilt. Real, visible guilt. I caught it in the way his voice cracked when he said, "I love you." I saw it in the way he avoided eye contact when I mentioned the future. He was starting to realize that something had shifted. He just didn't know what. And I loved watching him squirm. Because the truth is, I wasn't planning on staying. I knew that from the moment I saw those messages. But I wasn't going to walk away broken and humiliated. I was going to leave on my terms. And by the time I walked out that door, I wanted him questioning everything, himself, his choices, his worth. The password had shattered my world. Now, I was going to shatter his. If part of me had died that night when I saw those messages, another part was born, colder, sharper, and far less forgiving. And now, weeks into my quiet game, I could feel the balance of power shifting. He didn't know it yet, but the ground beneath his feet was starting to crack. It was in the small things at first. The way he checked my expression every time his phone buzzed. The way his voice hesitated when he said, "I love you." The way he'd linger in doorways like he was about to confess something, but never did. He had spent so long building his little lies that he didn't realize how fragile they were until I stopped being predictable. And I was no longer predictable. I stopped reacting the way I used to. When he mentioned future plans, I didn't light up with excitement. I just nodded, detached, as if the future was an abstract idea I no longer believed in. When he touched me, I didn't lean into him the way I used to. I let the moment pass, pretending I was lost in thought. I made sure every kiss, every hug, every smile carried the faintest echo of distance. Enough to make him wonder if something was wrong, but never enough for him to call me out on it. And it worked. I could see it eating at him. He became more attentive, more desperate to win my approval. He'd text me more often during the day, ask more questions, offer to help more around the house. It was like watching someone try to patch a sinking ship with duct tape, frantic and doomed. One night, he came home with flowers. My favorite kind, the ones I used to gush about early in our relationship. He handed them to me with that same charming smile he had used to win me over in the beginning. "They reminded me of you," he said softly. I stared at them for a long moment, then forced a small smile. "They're lovely," I replied, placing them on the kitchen counter without another word. I didn't mention how many times I had bought myself flowers just to feel loved. I didn't say how empty his gesture felt knowing what I knew. I just let the silence stretch and watched him squirm under the weight of it. Because this was never about revenge in the traditional sense. I didn't want to scream or throw things or expose him publicly. That would have been too easy. I wanted him to feel the slow, creeping realization that he had destroyed something he could never get back. I started changing my routine, too. I stayed out later than usual, claiming I had errands to run or work to catch up on. I'd come home with a faint smile and vague explanations. I wasn't lying. I was just reclaiming the parts of my life I had given up for him. The friends I'd stopped seeing. The hobbies I'd abandoned. The little pieces of myself that had been gathering dust while I tried to be the perfect partner. And he hated it. One night, when I came home later than usual, he was waiting for me in the living room. He tried to sound casual, but his tone was tight. "Where were you?" "Out," I said simply, hanging up my coat. With who? Just people, I replied, walking past him into the kitchen. I didn't owe him more than that. Not anymore. That night, he barely slept. I could feel the tension radiating off him as he lay next to me, tossing and turning, his mind clearly racing. And for the first time since I'd discovered his betrayal, I felt something close to satisfaction. He had wanted control over everything, over the narrative, over me, over how much I knew. Now, he was the one drowning in uncertainty. But even as I reveled in this subtle power shift, there were nights when the weight of it all crushed me. Nights when I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering how I had ended up here, playing psychological chess with a man I once believed was my soulmate. There was still love buried somewhere under the anger, but it was love poisoned by betrayal. And poisoned love doesn't heal, it rots. I began planning more concretely for my exit. I spoke with a lawyer just to understand my options. I researched affordable places to rent. I even started separating our belongings in my head. This is mine, that's his. Every step felt like reclaiming another piece of my freedom. And yet, I didn't rush. I wanted him to feel every inch of the distance growing between us. I wanted him to wake up one morning and realize he had lost me long before I ever walked out the door. The irony wasn't lost on me. He had spent months talking to strangers behind my back, and now he was terrified of who I might be texting. He had dismissed my feelings and treated my trust carelessly, and now he was desperate for reassurance I refused to give. There was a night when he looked at me across the dinner table, his eyes searching mine like they were the only lifeline he had left. And for a fleeting moment, I saw it, the fear of someone who knows he's about to lose everything. And I thought, good, let him feel it. Let him taste even a fraction of the pain he caused me. The password had unlocked the truth, and the truth was, the woman he betrayed no longer existed. What stood before him now was someone who had learned the art of patience. Someone who would not scream or cry or beg. Someone who would walk away so quietly that the silence would haunt him for the rest of his life. And that was only the beginning. The deeper I slipped into my quiet revenge, the more obvious it became that something inside him was unraveling. It wasn't dramatic, no screaming matches, no explosive confrontations, just small, almost imperceptible shifts that told me he was losing control of the story he had built. At first, it was little things. He'd linger by the door when I was getting ready to leave, pretending to tie his shoes while trying to see what was in my bag. He started glancing at my phone screen whenever I texted, even though he had once sworn he hated people who snooped. And he began asking casual, seemingly innocent questions about where I'd been, who I was with, what time I'd be back, all delivered with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I played dumb. I gave vague answers. I left conversations unfinished on purpose. I watched him wrestle with doubt and paranoia, and I didn't lift a finger to reassure him. And that's when he started slipping. One night, I caught him staring at me for a long time while we were watching a movie. I ignored it at first, but when I turned my head, his expression startled me. It wasn't anger or sadness. It was fear. Like he was finally beginning to understand that something had shifted in ways he couldn't control. Are we okay? He asked quietly, almost timidly. I looked at him for a moment before answering, deliberately letting the silence hang heavy between us. We're fine, I said softly, then turned back to the screen. But we both knew we were. The next few weeks were strange. He became overly affectionate, almost performative, like he was trying to remind me of who we used to be. He'd cook dinner and light candles, or surprise me with small gifts, or talk about trips we could take together in the future. And I would smile and thank him and keep my distance, knowing he was trying desperately to hold together something already broken. But the real cracks showed in his behavior when he thought I wasn't paying attention. He'd hover near the door when I left the room. He'd subtly glance at my laptop screen when I worked. He even accidentally left his phone face up once, a transparent attempt to show me he had nothing to hide now. I didn't fall for any of it. One night, he asked if I still loved him. The question caught me off guard, not because I didn't have an answer, but because I didn't expect him to ask. I looked at him for a long time, searching for the man I had fallen in love with, the one who had promised me safety and honesty and a shared future. But all I saw was someone who had squandered all of it for cheap validation and fleeting attention. Do you? I asked instead. He froze. Of course I do, he said almost too quickly. Why would you even ask that? I shrugged, turning away. I was just curious. He didn't press me after that, but I saw it, the doubt creeping in behind his eyes. And yet, for all his paranoia, he still believed he could fix this with charm. He still believed I was the same woman who once cried at the thought of losing him. What he didn't understand was that I wasn't waiting to be convinced anymore. I wasn't fighting for this relationship. I was observing it, studying the wreckage he had created, and I was planning my exit with surgical precision. I opened a new bank account he didn't know about. I redirected a small portion of my salary there every month. I started organizing my documents, scanning and saving them in places he couldn't access. I sold a few of my things online, small items he wouldn't notice were missing, and stashed the money away. It was liberating, this slow preparation. It made me feel powerful again, like I was no longer trapped in a story he controlled. Every quiet, deliberate action was a reminder that this wasn't his narrative anymore. It was mine. There was one night, though, that almost broke my resolve. I came home late, exhausted from a long day, and found him sitting on the couch with a photo album open on his lap. It was the one from our first year together, road trips, holidays, lazy Sundays spent in bed. He looked up at me with red eyes and said he missed us. He said he wanted to go back to the way things were. For a brief second, second, I felt something twist inside me. That small, foolish part of me that still loved him whispered that maybe we could fix it. That maybe love was stronger than betrayal. But then I remembered those messages. The deleted photos. The lies he told me every day while looking me in the eye. And the softness vanished. You should have thought of that before, I said quietly, walking past him. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I just left him sitting there with his memories. That night, I lay in bed listening to him, packing in the hallway long after midnight. And for the first time in months, I slept peacefully, because this was how I would win. Not by screaming or breaking things or making a scene, but by leaving him to sit alone in the silence he had created. By letting him watch, helpless, as the woman he once knew slipped further and further away, until one day, she was gone for good. And when that day came, it wouldn't be sudden. It wouldn't be dramatic. It would be quiet and irreversible. He would wake up, and I simply wouldn't be there. There's a strange kind of peace that comes when you stop trying to fix something. It's not the joyful peace that comes from happiness. It's quieter, heavier, like the stillness after a storm when everything lies broken but finally still. That's what the following weeks felt like for me. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't crying into my pillow or rehearsing confrontations in my head. I was simply done. And that, more than anything, scared him. He could feel it. I stopped asking about his day. I stopped offering advice or comfort when he complained about work. I stopped laughing at jokes that weren't funny. Our conversations became shorter, colder, stripped down to logistics and necessities. Dinner, in the fridge. I'm going to bed. Can you pick up milk tomorrow? And the more I withdrew, the more frantic he became. He started doing chores he had ignored for years, scrubbing the bathroom, cooking elaborate meals, leaving flowers on the table like that would erase everything he'd done. He'd wrap his arms around me while I cooked, searching for some sign that I was still his. But I would gently step out of his reach and keep chopping onions without a word. The shift terrified him, and I could see it in every small gesture. He began questioning himself out loud, packing the living room late at night and muttering things like, "I don't know what's happening to us," or, "I feel like I'm losing you." Good, I thought, you should. Meanwhile, my plan was quietly unfolding in the background. I had already secured a new place to stay, a tiny apartment on the other side of town. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I moved small things there bit by bit, a few books, some clothes, little pieces of my life he wouldn't notice missing. I even started taking my important documents to work and leaving them in a locked drawer. I didn't tell anyone. No dramatic announcements, no crying to friends. The only person who knew was me, and that made it feel more powerful. Like I was the only one holding the script while he still believed he was improvising. One night he came home late, reeking of alcohol. He stumbled through the door, trying to act casual, but his words were slurred and his eyes were glassy. He started rambling about how much he loved me, how sorry he was, how he never meant to hurt me. And then, as if reading from a script of manipulation, he said the line I had been waiting for. I only did those things because I was lonely. I stared at him for a long time. That single sentence encapsulated everything: the selfishness, the refusal to take responsibility, the utter inability to see beyond himself. He wasn't sorry for betraying me. He was sorry that it had consequences. I didn't argue. I didn't even respond. I just stood up, walked past him, and locked myself in the bedroom. He knocked for almost half an hour. I didn't open the door. After that night, things between us shifted even more dramatically. He started accusing me of hiding things. He'd glance suspiciously at my phone when it buzzed, asking, "Who's that?" He'd casually mention how he hoped I wasn't planning anything behind his back. It would have been laughable if it weren't so pathetic. The man who had spent years lying to me now terrified that I might return the favor. And in a way, I guess I was. The weeks slipped by, and the distance between us grew into a chasm. We still lived under the same roof, but we were no longer a couple. We were two strangers coexisting out of convenience, a ghost of a relationship, empty and fragile. One evening, as we sat in silence eating dinner, he suddenly put down his fork and stared at me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. "Are you planning to leave me?" he asked. It wasn't a question. It was a fear clawing its way out of his chest. I met his gaze calmly. "Why would you think that?" "Because you're different," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "You don't talk to me. You don't look at me the same way. You're somewhere else." He was right, of course. I was already gone. My body was sitting at that table, but my heart and mind were elsewhere. In the future I was building without him. I shrugged. People change. It wasn't the answer he wanted, but it was the only one I was willing to give. That night he cried. I heard him in the bathroom, muffling sobs behind the door. A few months ago, it might have broken me, but now it didn't move me at all, because I realized something important. He wasn't crying because he regretted losing me. He was crying because he regretted losing control. And that's what my silence had taken from him. The final piece of my plan fell into place a week later. I scheduled the moving truck for a day I knew he'd be gone. An early shift at work followed by drinks with friends. I had arranged everything down to the hour. By the time he came home that night, my clothes, my books, my things, even the scent of my perfume would be gone. All that would be left was the shell of the life he had destroyed. And maybe, when he walked into that empty apartment, he'd finally understand the weight of what he'd done. Or maybe he wouldn't. Maybe he'd tell himself another story to make himself the victim. Maybe he'd blame me. It didn't matter anymore. Because for the first time since I had opened that cursed Instagram app and watched my world collapse, his version of the story no longer defined me. The morning I left him was so ordinary it almost felt wrong. The sun filtered through the curtains just like it always did. The coffee maker sputtered and hissed in the kitchen. The floor creaked in the same familiar way under my feet. And yet, every small detail felt sharper, more vivid, like the universe was silently marking the day my life would split into a before and an after. I had woken up before dawn, not out of anxiety but out of clarity. Everything was already packed. 2 suitcases, and 3 boxes lined up neatly by the door. My most important documents were tucked into my backpack, along with a small notebook where I had written everything I didn't want to forget about this chapter of my life. Not because I wanted to relive it, but because I wanted to remember why I would never go back. I moved quietly through the apartment, almost reverently. I touched the kitchen counter where we used to laugh over late-night snacks. I glanced at the couch where I had once fallen asleep in his arms, believing I was safe. None of those memories hurt anymore. They felt like scenes from someone else's life. Someone naive. Someone who hadn't yet learned that trust could be shattered by a single password. I left a note on the table. Not an apology, not a dramatic monologue, just a few simple sentences. I know everything. I stayed long enough to understand what I deserved, and it isn't this. Don't contact me. Take care of yourself. No anger, no explanations, just closure. By the time the movers arrived, I was strangely calm. They loaded the boxes into the truck with mechanical efficiency while I stood by the door, heart beating steadily. The only thing left was my key. I placed it on the coffee table beside the note and stared at it for a moment. That tiny piece of metal had once symbolized home. Now it was just a reminder of a cage I had outgrown. I stepped outside and didn't look back. The first breath I took on the street felt different, deeper, freer. I had imagined this moment so many times, storming out in rage, screaming, maybe even crying. But the reality was nothing like that. It was quiet, peaceful, like slipping out of a too-tight dress you'd been wearing for far too long. Later that evening, my phone exploded with messages. Missed calls, voicemails, frantic texts ranging from desperate apologies to furious accusations. I didn't read any of them. I had already blocked his number. I knew how the story would go. He'd rewrite the narrative in his mind, casting himself as the victim, me as the heartless villain who just left. But the truth didn't need his validation anymore. Days turned into weeks, and life began to bloom again. My tiny apartment, bare and quiet at first, slowly became a sanctuary. I bought a small plant for the windowsill. I started cooking meals just for myself, experimenting with recipes I had always wanted to try. I slept deeply, without the weight of suspicion pressing down on my chest. And then one morning, weeks later, I opened my phone and deleted his name from every trace of my digital life. Old photos, saved messages, even the shared playlists we once made. It wasn't out of bitterness. It was simply because I no longer needed reminders of a story that had ended. It's strange how much power a single act, typing a password, opening an app, reading a hidden message, can have over your entire existence. That one moment had detonated everything I thought I knew. It had turned love into disillusionment, certainty into suspicion, trust into rubble. But it had also forced me to rebuild. And in that rebuilding, I found something stronger than anything I had before, myself. For a long time, I blamed myself for trusting too easily, for ignoring the red flags, for letting someone else define my worth. But now I see that none of those things were weaknesses. They were lessons. Painful, brutal lessons, but lessons nonetheless. He thought he had broken me when he betrayed me. But all he did was strip away everything false. The illusions, the lies, the stories I told myself to keep the peace. What was left, raw and exposed, was me bruised, yes, but unbreakable. Sometimes, I still catch myself thinking about the girl I was before all this. The one who believed in forever, who thought love could fix anything. I wish I could hug her and tell her that everything she's about to endure will hurt like hell, but it will also set her free. Because the truth is, that password didn't just destroy my relationship. It saved my life. It forced me to confront reality, to see the cracks I had been painting over for years. It pushed me to stop waiting for someone else to choose me and finally choose myself. And now, when I walk into my little apartment at the end of the day, I feel something I haven't felt in a very long time. Peace. Not the fragile peace that depends on someone else's promises, but the steady, unshakable peace that comes from standing on my own 2 feet. And for the first time in years, I truly know, that I will never let anyone take that away from me again.